Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we are picking up in the aftermath of where things left off in the previous episode. Obviously, we learned a little bit more about Allie's circumstances, that her whole religious cult thing that she's got going on is actually a family thing. She actually had an opportunity to walk away from it because she kind of inherited all of it, but basically she had to pick whether she was going to continue her father's work, which, like, the lawyer or whatever was kind of like, don't do this, like, your dad, like, this whole taking this pendant thing, it poisoned him, but Allie decided to take it and, you know, grow it into what it is now. And so, sadly, we see that Chrissy is kind of drawn into this because her and Lois aren't on the same page. Because she thinks Lois only tells her the truth when it benefits her. It's always like, right, it feels like I'm more so working under you rather than working with you. And even Lois is kind of like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And it's a sad thing of, we know that Chrissy is not in the know about a lot of stuff, especially the Morgan Edge stuff, like, because Lois keeps a lot of that quiet because a lot of it ties back to her family, so she can't tell Chrissy everything. But I'm sure Chrissy's going to be like, no, you can trust me, I'm your confidant. Like, if you confided in me, I could be like, okay, I'd be more understanding, because we aren't supposed to just be like, oh, you're my boss. It's like, no, we're supposed to be partners in this. So Chrissy feels unappreciated. So it's understandable. And also, she comes at it from the perspective of, like, right, you're, like, omitting certain aspects of the truth. Like, my point was before, and I thought it still was, a lot of what Allie was speaking was kind of dangerous stuff, because it almost led to Lucy killing herself. Like, she almost died in the process. So that's why I'm like, is it really that bad for Lois to, like, leave out certain aspects of what, like, Lucy told her? But then I guess in retrospect, the whole thing is like, well, once again, it is the DC universe. Even just aside from that, it's like, this could be something that, Allie and her group could be discovering something that could change humanity forever. So I guess it is important, but I'm also like, if people are endangering their lives, like, as a reporter, don't you have, like, an obligation not to really put any information out there that can make people go like, oh, let me be all about this, especially because she has this very, like, cult-like following. Like, it just seems like you're just going to try potentially put people in a position where they might be indoctrinated more. So, like, I don't know. I was definitely anti, like, I think Lois did the right thing, but, you know, maybe, I don't know, from a journalistic standpoint, it is the thing of, you just got to tell it like it is. You got, like, by omitting stuff, you are including your own bias, and journalism is supposed to be without bias. But I think there's no escaping some bias, you know, but it's supposed to be just like, at least with the news, you're supposed to be like, straight facts. I'm not going to put my opinion out there. I'm just going to put the facts, and then I'll tell you, this is my opinion, but first and foremost, got to lay out all the facts, first and foremost. I think it's kind of like what a journalist is supposed to do, at the very least, you know? So that complicates things. But it is the point that, because I even brought it up, because I'm already blanking on what her, because I believe her group is the name of the title of the previous episode, but essentially it's very similar to Bizarro, that you're like, okay, I was like, that's interesting. She happens to have a cult that's basically got a name very similar to Bizarro and potentially his world. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And even Lois started thinking, like, maybe there's some correlation there, because the lady who works in the mine, Faulkner, like, the one who kind of started all this, it turns out she actually has ties to Allie and her group. She's actually part of it. So it's like, so there's definitely connection here, especially when Lois starts deep diving into, like, the whole aspect of, like, right, she talks about, like, another world, like a shadow version. So it's like, maybe what Allie said wasn't wrong. Maybe there was truth to what Lucy was saying. So it's like, maybe this Bizarro person is like a mirror version of you, like your other half or something. And so figuring all that out while Clark has to deal with the whole Anderson situation, because it turns out that, well, Tag is luckily alive. He's really banged up, and the pendant ended up getting in Anderson's hands, and Anderson won't cooperate with Clark because it's like, right, you didn't tell me that this was a Superman that we were fighting too, but it's like, we're not the same, we're not connected. Like, the fact is, you didn't listen when I warned you not to send children out there. He's like, they're soldiers. And, you know, but it's like, yeah, I think it's his own, like, as their commanding officer, he's taking he's lashing out at Clark, but I think there's also an element of, well, he needs someone to blame other than himself because he's already blaming himself because it's like, as their commanding officer, he sent them to their deaths unprepared. But he was so like, oh, we got this. My team's good. We got this on lock. And it's like, no, 2 of your members are dead. 1 is like in pretty bad condition. So it's like that. But he's also going to blame Clark because it's like, right, you didn't tell me. Plus, it's already tiptoeing in that direction of like, how can I trust you when you won't work with us? Yeah, like the problem is you are one of, if not the most powerful being on this planet. There are very few things and people that could go toe to toe with you. And when you don't align with us, when we're not able to basically keep you in check, you want to do things your own way, it makes us a little nervous. It makes the U.S. government nervous when you're just kind of doing all willy-nilly whatever you want to. So, not like I agree, not that I'm agreeing, but I understand where Anderson's perspective on things are, and it's like, cool, if I, like, that trust is starting to wane more and more, because he's like, right, you're keeping stuff to yourself, also you won't align with us, that it's just like, you're too big of you're too much of a large enough entity. You are basically a country your own self, like in the grand scheme of the power structure of this world when it comes to governments and the power of these countries and stuff like that. You are a powerhouse on your own. You pretty much are a representative, a country in your own right. So it's like when we have this nuclear option that is Superman, like, of course people are going to respond a certain way. So definitely things between him and Anderson are definitely going to get more antagonistic probably as the season progresses after this, because Anderson's like, cool, you bring me that like other version of you, then fine, you'll get the necklace back. But it's like Clark's like, you're making a mistake doing this, like, because he's saying that like, oh, you guys are like, you both get pumped up. He's like, if I was like benefiting from this whole thing, why would I tell Tag to take off with it? He's like, no, you actually told Tag to run. The necklace or pendant ended up flying near him, so he ended up grabbing it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But eventually his doppelganger does show up again, in fact, to kill Faulkner. So it's like, she got it pretty rough, because it almost looked like, and at least the way her head turned, I was like, it almost looked like he pretty much like almost 180'd her neck. It almost looked like, I don't know if it was a full 180. It looked like it might have been like a 170 at most, but yeah, that looked pretty brutal. But the thing is, he did stop when he saw Lois. So, and Lois kind of wonders, like, you know, well, Clark is like, maybe he has a Lois of his own on his arm. He's like, yeah, they are similar in many different regards, except they are opposites in others. So the fact is that, you know, and they showcase it even more, like the freeze heat vision, the freeze vision, and the heat breath. But I did love them going toe to toe, which was pretty impressive. I also love that, like, this, I don't know whether it is Clark got souped up from the last fight or what it was, but something, maybe he started feeding off a little bit more, because this fight ended up, like, because before it was a little more one-sided, but maybe it's also because Clark wasn't getting the visions at the time, but, like, this fight was severely one-sided. Well, it was at least leaning more towards Clark. I'd say it was like 60-40, Clark with the favor leaning more towards Clark. But I thought that was interesting because, like, the previous fights, it kind of had the advantages, but, like, this time Clark did. So I don't know whether, like, he's kind of feeding off of its energy to some extent. But yeah, it turns out he's actually targeting Allie. He wants her dead, and this kind of ties all in with what Chrissy went through this episode, because she ends up talking to Lois about it, because Chrissy drugged her, or no, Allie drugged Chrissy and was like, oh, you're going to experience it yourself. So she saw this other world and saw, like, oh, like this, the Bizarro world, which is like, you know, the mirror image, the shadow version of this world where things are topsy-turvy and stuff like that. So it's something I haven't really, like, I think I've referenced it previously. My only other experience with that is, like, the animated series where Bizarro popped up, the 90s animated Superman series, and, like, the jokes that the Teen Titans Go made where they met, like, their Bizarro versions. So, like, it's a world I know nothing about, because I don't know if that's something they ever really even covered in the original, like, the animated series from the 90s. I always remember Bizarro, but I don't remember if they ever really went into, like, him having a whole world and everything. I legitimately don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen it. But it is really interesting that going back to the whole point of like, right, they're opposites to each other. Clark ended up taking him to the mine, and in his hand he had yellow kryptonite and start punching the ever-living hell out of his Bizarro counterpart, and ended up beating, because he did say, like, right, we are opposite. So green kryptonite is his weakness. X kryptonite, which gives people powers, must be his typical kryptonite. Maybe that's like the argument. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's kind of like the suggestion it's kind of going with there. But I thought that was... I mean, it didn't seem like it necessarily had any extra like, it didn't seem like his skin got that, like, discoloration that, like, like Kara and Clark get when they're around kryptonite. It didn't seem like he got that, even though Clark had, like, the yellow kryptonite in his hand, but maybe it did play some role. It just didn't have any, like, effect to it. Like, it's not like you saw it glowing, or, like I said, it had no, like, discoloration to his skin or anything like that. Maybe it was just sapping his strength and we just didn't know it. But regardless, based on what Chrissy talked about, she says, like, right, Lucy and them were right, but she's like, I saw Allie. And Allie is basically, like, I don't know if she's running the country or whatever, or potentially the world, but it's like, Allie's amassed a superpower in that world, like, she's taking over. And so when Clark is, like, worked with his mom's help, he's able to actually talk to the other version of himself, and it's like, he's like, I should have killed you. It's like, well, you didn't, so why are you here? He's like, I'm here to save my world, and yours too. And he's like, basically it involves killing Allie. So we know in his world, Allie is basically big bad, but it's like, how does she become that? Like, what happened? Because part of me was wondering, is it going to be a situation where both, because of Allie, whether it's that version of Allie or it's just this version of Allie, connected both worlds, and now they're colliding with each other and going to bleed over into each other, and if they continue bleeding over, it's going to be like, both worlds, like, are no longer separated by a boundary, that they're going to be colliding with one another, and that's going to end up destroying both worlds. Maybe that's the justification for why he's saying that. But yeah, he's mainly here to kill Chris. But I'm like, why is he trying to kill Clark, though? I guess maybe because he knows, like, right, I know who you are. I need to kill you, because if I don't kill you, you'll try and protect her. You try to do the right thing. Because he says, I'm a soldier, and in war, there are casualties. Which I think is so interesting. Like, we don't know his circumstances or from his world, but for him to be the soldier that he is, which Clark is like, no, I'm not a soldier. Which I think maybe there's supposed to be a parallel there, whereas, like, Anderson wants Clark to basically a soldier and fall in line, follow the chain of command, where Clark's like, nah, I'm not about that. Whereas it seems like, to some extent, you can make, it almost feels like Bizarro is kind of like that. Maybe not, it's not a one-for-one, but there seems like there could be something, like there could be a story telling parallel to their circumstances like that, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm so curious, like, what the state of that Bizarro world is, and how did Allie manage to do that? Like, why her specifically? Is it because she herself has taken this? Because, like, once again, this is going, like, this whole religion thing has gone in her family for a very long, long time, but she was the one that was finally able to kind of take it where no one else in her family was able to. And I'm curious, what was it that allowed that? Because obviously Chrissy, like, connected with, like, her other self and all this because of the pendant, but, like, where's this Bizarro come from? Like, why is it that, like, obviously Faulkner, like, knew that something was in the mines related to all this, because that's what she was kind of hoping for. So, meaning Allie knew what was down there, but I guess she wasn't quite expecting, like, a Bizarro version of Superman. Maybe? It's hard to say, like, how much and what they actually know, what they believe they know, when in actuality they probably don't know anything at all. It's kind of, they probably have their own understanding of things, but even then it's probably like, yeah, you have a loose understanding of what's really going on, but still. I don't know. My mind's just trying to I'm trying to wrap my brain around. Because Allie's whole thing is about basically people being complete, because there's another version of yourself out there in a different world, a different kind of thing. So it's all about, like, oh, both halves of you coming together, but maybe once, like I brought up about the worlds coming together, could be could be a catastrophe. Maybe the same thing applies to people coming together. So like people being around their essential doppelgangers could potentially lead to like a fusion, and that could be a big issue in its own right. We'll have to wait and see, but even to the point Bizarro's telling, Clark, like, oh, you need to kill her. It's the only way, because that woman, if you let her live, she will take everything and everyone you hold dear to you away from you. And he never said the line, but I was almost thinking, like, is he talking from personal experience? Because in his world, she took everything from him, everyone from him. So at the very least, with all of this stuff with Allie too, I'm actually surprised Chrissy and Lois are back on a better page. I'm sure like there's going to be some changes to their dynamic going forward, because I think Lois is going to try and be more honest with Chrissy and kind of, but it's like, right, like her and Chrissy are kind of back on the same page after everything, so it didn't go the way Allie probably was hoping it would. I guess she figured if she could get someone like Chrissy on her side, see the truth of everything, then it's like, oh, cool. It's like, well, Chrissy had her experience, and then there's the Bizarro Superman showing up the way he did. Like, I think all that kind of muddied the water of Allie probably, like, getting her. Because, like, the moment Allie saw the Bizarro Superman, she almost had a look, and you could tell Lois kind of almost, like, glanced at it, being like, okay, you definitely know more about what's going on here than you're letting on. At the same time all this is going on, there's the whole situation with Jordan and Jonathan. Well, initially Jordan's trying to get training from Sam, and so he brings Jonathan along. And I'm curious what was Sam's reasoning for that, because I guess he didn't want to leave Jonathan out of it, because it's an issue. It's already been budding there. Like, whether he realizes it or not, Jonathan was always the golden child. He was always the bigger athlete. Like, he was always, like, the golden child, like, because Jordan had his circumstances, his social anxiety disorder, and on top of that, like, but Jonathan was always, like I said, the golden boy, and now that's kind of waned a bit, because Jordan's got the power, he's getting training, and he's going to be the one helping Dad as, like, the superpowered son, as Superboy, as he kind of refers to him as. And so it is a thing of like Jonathan's pushing himself, but his grandpa's like, yeah, that's enough. He's like, no, that's getting 50 push-ups in under a minute. Like, that's a little above average. It's like, yeah. And you could tell like Jonathan was like tired from it, but Jordan wasn't. Jordan was like, yeah, I could do better. But it's like, yeah, because he has and you can tell like that resentment is starting to build up of like, right, like I'm getting saddled in more way. Like, it's already bad enough I got saddled for so long on the, when it came to football. Now, like, because of my brother, now because of, like, was it Timmy? Like, and now I know that Timmy's doping with X-Kryptonite, now I'm doing the same thing too. And so he ends up being like, oh no, like, oh, you just let Jordan punch like that. And it's like, no, let's go toe to toe. He probably won't even land a punch on me. And then Jordan was like, come on, like, let's not do this. Which is interesting timing for a brother versus brother thing. Just saying, if you've seen some other DC property, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, recently, that kind of things didn't end too well in a brothers being forced to fight thing. So, but the thing is, Jonathan, with some of that X-Kryptonite, ends up laying into Jordan and ends up, like, kind of knocking him down. And he later on, like, Jordan calls him out, Jonathan out for being so aggro. He's like, I'm not being aggro. You're just not seeing what the truth is. Like, I'm better than you. I'm like, yeah, kind of gonna concede it. All right. But it's like, yeah, because a lot of his life isn't what he wanted it to be. Like, he feels like what made him, like, once again, I think things came a little easier to Jonathan, and now all of a sudden, like, things are coming so easy to Jordan. Like, Jordan gets to be special. Jordan gets to kill on a football field. He gets to be the one that's recognized. He's the one, like, oh, like, I'm going to be the one that end up helping Dad. And it's just like, it casts a very large shadow on his brother. And, and I think for someone who's never had to be in the shadows, like, he's had to do it for a while now, ever since coming to Smallville, like, he's had to be in his brother's shadow. And I think it was already there to some extent, but he balanced it out a little bit more last season. I think with the X-Kryptonite, it just leans in and kind of like, drugs can bring out the worst of someone, especially when you get addicted to something. And I think that's what's happening here. So Jordan actually ended up talking to Sarah, and I thought was really interesting because she was like, don't just let it go, because she was like, initially I just thought like, oh, I didn't really think much of it, like I was just like, oh, maybe I was just a little sad, and then things just started like picking up more and more. So she even suggesting like maybe Jonathan's depressed, and I think he is. Like, he has a lot of stuff that he needs to work out, that he is just kind of bottling up to the point he is kind of lashing out at Jordan. And so Jordan wants to talk to him about it later on because of Sarah's advice, and he ends up kind of displaying heat vision. Now, I think this speaks volumes. Like, up until now, at least based on what Candace said, it seems like everyone only got one superpower. It seems like Jonathan got the enhanced, like, sensory, because at first it's like his sight he got the super sight. But then, like, going up against Jordan, it seemed like there was some, like, blows, some impact there. So it seemed like he was getting some super strength. Now he's got heat vision on top of it. Like, it is somewhere in his DNA. Like, now whether he can full-blown become, like, a Superboy as well, like, whether it's just buried in his DNA, whether he's just gonna, whether it becomes possible or not, like, whether the ex-Kryptonite is tickling the Kryptonian DNA in him that's basically, inert, begs the question, or, you know, because it's just like, they've made it seem like you only get one power. So for him to be displaying multiples, it seems like, you know, and I brought that up previously, like, despite him not displaying any abilities currently, he is still half Kryptonian, whether or not that DNA is just, like, he's still it's still there, it's probably just slumbering. So what kind of effect this ex-Kryptonite will have on him compared to other people who are just normal people? It allowed for Kryptonians to take over their subconscious, like, you know, implant their subconsciouses in their bodies and stuff. So what kind of effect would it have on someone who's actually part Kryptonian? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But Jordan wants to keep it secret. I mean, Jonathan's like, no, Jordan, don't. Let me figure things out for myself. Because, like, Jordan's like, oh my God, you got powers. Like, yeah, Mom and Dad will be happy about it. It's like, yeah, because he knows where his powers are coming from. And he knows, like, the moment this happens, they're going to be asking questions. So, and the sad thing is, he's going to be keeping this up now. Because he knows, like, crap, Jordan knows now. So now I have to keep taking it more and more. So that I keep displaying these abilities. He's going to get more and more addicted to it over and over and until, like, I mean, the withdrawal symptoms for this is probably going to be pretty massive as well, because we see how much of a mood change it's already causing in him. I think it's just amplifying what was already there, like some of that, like, insecurity, some of the depression. Like, I think it's amplifying what was already there. Then you add on top of that, if he does, like, try to, like, go cold turkey, like, potential withdrawal and stuff like that. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how long he can keep this secret and how where all this ends up going. But another part of this episode is Sarah's quinceañera. I'm going to butcher that. I can never say that word. I'm sorry. And it is this fun, like, family thing. It's this beautiful moment between her, you know, her dad and her mom. It's interesting too because she wants to take back their family's original name, because he's the, like, his father took the name Cushing, and she's like, she kind of feels bad that was a thing, but it's like, Kyle's like, yeah, it's something that had to happen. It was the only way he was going to be able to keep a job. That's the only way he was going to, like, fit in, like, especially given the time frame and stuff like that. So, but Sarah wants to take that back, you know, take their last name back, because she embraces and wholeheartedly is proud of her heritage and her family, so she's not going to shy away from it. So, along with all of that, Kyle's getting a call from Tanya, which she's kind of ignoring her, and it's just kind of like, it's heartbreaking because you can see him leaning into the family stuff even more, because he feels even more guilty about the Tanya stuff. And, later on, she shows up at the quinceañera to the point, like, he was like, why are you here? And I was like, oh, please, this is go. But she's like, no, I'm here because my girlfriend knows about. I kind of told her. He's like, wait, you told her? It's like, yeah, you promised me that you were going to leave your wife for me. Like, I loved you. Like, I wanted us to be a thing, but I didn't, like, she is desperate for money and stuff like that, so she might tell Dean. And it's like, I don't want to hurt you, Kyle. I wanted to be with you. And sadly, in that time frame, because they were outside, I was like, they're going to find out. I was like, Sarah's going to overhear this, isn't she? And I thought she was actually going to full-blown walk on her and Dad, like, Dad? And it's going to, like, but she just, her and Jordan over her. And the sad thing is when he came back inside and, Clark's like, are you okay? He's like, no, he's like, I made a huge mistake and I think my family's going to fall apart and pay the price for it. Because Dean is definitely lowering it over his head, being like, oh yeah, got a few secrets, huh? So... And during the father-daughter dance, Sarah dances with him, and then, she just can't, and she kind of has a bit of a panic attack. And it's and the secrets come out, which, for Lana, it's like, no, we'll figure this all out for now, but, Sarah, we have to go back in there, because, all those people here, they're here for you because they love you and care about you. We'll deal with all this, but it's I'll be by your side, And I love the speech that she gave to Sarah about, obviously, you're not wanting your children to grow up. You kind of want them to stay babies forever. But it's I'm proud of the young woman she is today. I just hope that she'll allow me to stay by her side throughout, kind of essentially the journey of her life. So, Kyle's in the background and you see him kind of leave. So, what that translates to, what I mean is what that looks like going forward. Sadly, he's probably going to backpedal, start drinking too. Obviously, Dean is going to use this as ammunition. I think... It's sad, but that does affect people's minds and be like, oh, you got this family situation. I don't know, some people that might make Lana more sympathetic considering she's going through what she's going through, but the argument could be oh, can't handle stuff at home, why are you going to handle stuff at small? That's going to be that could be someone's BS argument or something like that, but I think Kyle is going to start spiraling now. Because of all of this, so that's kind of a bummer. Just when the family was on the up and up, but it's just right, he wasn't in a good spot, him and Lana weren't in a good spot at the time, and now it's just all bubbling to the surface. So now that it's all out there, if their family, where do they go from here? Will Lana be able to forgive Kyle? Especially for Sarah, it was always right, she was always giving him another shot, forgiving him, and it was good for a while, and then just things kind of falling apart again. So will Sarah give him another shot after this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see, but it's definitely going to be really interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.